Okay, thank you very much for that great introduction. Um, I think we had a great day yesterday, didn't we? Yes. And I'm especially pleased about the discussions and the interaction. I really think it's very valuable to hear from all of you. You're very competent in your area, and I'm very happy that we have this second day. So I would like to make a brief presentation. And after that, I would actually open up the floor and I would like to ask you how it works in your country. Because this EU project is also based on sharing good practice and best practice. So we have very many competent people here. So I'm looking forward to that too. So moving into the subject, legal aid for victims of human trafficking in Sweden. As you heard yesterday, we work as lawyers to provide legal assistance to victims of human trafficking. This is one of the girls, one of the women that we meet, and one of the cases that we have right now. This woman, she fled from a country in Africa, and she was promised by the traffickers to have a work as a hairdresser in Italy. And as you know, often the traffickers give them false promises for work. So she brought her little daughter with her. And when she arrived to Italy, she found out that she was in a brothel, she was in an apartment with a lot of other women, and that these people had fooled her. They were traffickers. And what they did was that they tried to force her into prostitution, but she resisted for a long while. And then she had her little daughter with her. And in order to force her into prostitution, they actually used a lot of violence, as they often do. And in this case, they took the daughter and the mother, locked them into a room. They put a gun against the head of the little daughter, who was 5 years old by then. And they took the cigarettes and lit them at her back. And then they forced the daughter to watch while they raped and tortured their mother. And of course, after some days and some weeks, they had managed to break her down totally. So then she was used in prostitution by the traffickers, but then she managed to run away. And finally she came to Sweden. And then she was placed at a wonderful shelter in southern part of Sweden. We heard from that director from that shelter yesterday. And then we started our cooperation. And before I go into that specifically, how that works when it comes to refugees and people seeking asylum for when they are victims of human trafficking, I just also want to mention that we are also partners in an exit program with the Angel and the Swedish Red Light District. And some of you have met this little angel before. The Red Light District in Sweden is not actually a red light district when you compare to other European countries. Because we have the Sex Purchase Act, and because it is forbidden to purchase sexual services, the street prostitution has been reduced to half since that ban was introduced. But still we have some streets. And in Stockholm we have one street called Malmskillnadsgatan, and that is the prostitution street. That is also where the traffickers have their girls. So we run an exit program together with the Angel in the Red Light District, trying to actually give these women an option, because as we spoke of earlier, many of them feel that this is their only choice, and we want to give them an option to actually exit prostitution. And when it comes to victims of human trafficking, we are there and giving them the legal, social, health, and all the advice they need. Okay, so legal aid for victims of human trafficking in Sweden. A public counsel is applied in asylum cases, And the public counsel is a lawyer or a solicitor that is appointed by the state, by the migration authorities. And the Swedish Migration Agency decides if a public counsel is needed. And it is totally funded by the state, and the asylum seekers do not need to pay anything. The exceptions from the public counsel appointment is the Dublin cases. We spoke about the Dublin cases before. And when it comes to these cases, it is very hard, of course, because sometimes these victims of human trafficking, when they don't have a right to public counsel, they are totally dependent on a lawyer that they can take their case anyway. So that is what we do. We run a pro bono program. So many of our cases, we assist the victims of human trafficking, even if we are not the public counsels. But in several of the cases, we are public counsels, and the Swedish Migration Agency then will pay for the case for the client. And when it comes to criminal proceedings, then victims of crimes as described as we spoke about yesterday in Chapter 4 and Chapter 6 of the Penal Code, then they will have a public counsel appointed. And this happens once a preliminary investigation has been initiated. And then under certain paragraphs of the Preliminary Investigation Act, a victim can make a claim for compensation, but it is only once the crime has been reported to the police that this will happen. And then we have the compensation for victims of violent crimes, and that is ensured in the Swedish Criminal Injury Compensation Act. And under this act, a deciding board called the Crime Victim Compensation and Support Authority, in Swedish Brottsoffermyndigheten, they have the task to attend to the needs of victims and oversee and also make the decisions regarding victim compensation. And victims can be compensated if the crime took place within Sweden, or if it happens to a Swedish resident outside the state's border. And as we spoke about yesterday, we always encourage our clients to make a police report, even if the crime is committed abroad, and even if the perpetrators are abroad. We still encourage them to do that because it's important to involve the police. And then the police, in many of our cases, then they will report to the other police authorities in that country where the crime has been reported or where the crime has been committed. And along with the Liability Act, skadeståndslagen, a victim of crime such as human trafficking is then entitled to compensation, and that is for physical as well as psychological damages caused to the victim. And this claim, it has to be filed within 2 years following the conclusion of the court proceedings. And we also spoke about cases where the victims are identified outside of this legal process. And I believe that Nina will touch upon that as well. And I spoke about some of those issues that these, of course, that creates sometimes a problem that we need to handle. But in those cases, the members of society or NGOs have identified these people, then the social services may assist. But then they will provide the victim with a smaller amount of funds in the form of an emergency assistance, and that is to provide for the victim's daily needs. But if they are asylum seekers or refugees, then that will involve the civil society in that program as well. So we will hear more on that topic from Nina. And then we have circumstances specific to a child victim cases, and this is the little girl that we spoke about. And she was so traumatized that she lost the ability to eat. She lost the ability to speak, even if she was 5 years old. she had to start to use diapers again, even if she was 5 years old. And she lost the ability to play. And her mother was so devastated because she tried to communicate with her, but it was not possible because she was just staring in front of herself, and she couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, she couldn't do anything. She was very traumatized. And as we heard from Dr. Björn Egeus yesterday, it's very, very important for these children to come to a safe environment. And we're so happy that we have this collaboration with these shelters that really provide a safe environment and also a possibility for the family together to be safe and secure and have all the legal, health, social, and every need fulfilled. So, and when it comes to child trafficking victims that are victims of human trafficking themselves, if a minor has been granted a residence permit, then he or she is entitled to have a legal representative appointed when making a claim of human trafficking offense. And a child victim who has a Swedish residence permit, then they will receive the same social and health benefits as native Swedes, and they have the right to go to school. According to the Social Services Act, once an investigation is initiated, then a legal guardian who will be responsible for an accompanied minor's well-being then will be appointed. And if a child victim or a witness to a violent crime, either within Sweden or outside its borders, then we speak about individuals with Swedish residence permit, they are also entitled to claim for compensation for a trafficking offense, which has been reported to the police. And then under the Criminal Injury Compensation Act, then the minor is entitled to initiate a claim for compensation up until the age of 21. And thereafter, no claim can be made unless the circumstances are deemed justified. So this was just a short perspective on Sweden, on the legal aid for victims of human trafficking in Sweden. And now I would like to open up the floor to you. And I would like to start maybe with Belgium, to hear from you. Mm-hmm.
So should a minor be granted residence permit, he or she is entitled to have a legal representative appointed when making a claim of human trafficking, not before, but after?
Well, that is when the victim is, when the crime is committed either in Sweden, as we spoke about, all the criminal proceedings are all the time connected to either the crime has to be committed in Sweden or the perpetrators have to be in Sweden. Otherwise, the Swedish courts don't have authority. So when we speak about the refugees or the asylum seekers, then they will have, then there's another system, of course. Yes. So that.
Again, yeah, I'm confused because it's completely different with us.
Exactly.
Different systems to be recognized as a victim of human trafficking.
Could you speak more about that? That's very interesting.
In Belgium, we only have one system.
Yes.
And we think that the profile of a victim of human trafficking not necessarily is the same profile as an asylum seeker. So nevertheless, they can enter two procedures at the same time. So if a refugee has the profile of a refugee but has been also the victim of human trafficking, they can solicit for both procedures at the same time. But nevertheless, we have a completely separate procedure for victims of human trafficking, and it's open to all, it's a procedure open for third countries and European citizens, where they can cooperate with the justice, make declarations, or file a report with the police. And in return of that, they will receive social help, residence permits, etc., etc. And the asylum procedure has actually nothing to do with this THP procedure. It's really separate, so they're not linked with each other.
What is the case in Belgian law? Is being a victim of human trafficking and a ground for asylum?
victim of trafficking in Sweden, for example, or in Belgium, let's make Belgium, it cannot find grounds in one of the 5 convention grounds. So being a victim only if you're considered a social group, for example, and in return, when you return, you are maybe you have a risk to be retracked.
That will be the same thing then for Sweden. Yes.
You can get the refugee status.
Yes.
Their protection, but actually, if you have been a victim of human trafficking and the risk of return, because now we're talking about women and prostitution and sexual abuse and sexual exploitation, but human trafficking goes much further than that, and we have in Belgium a lot of cases of economical exploitation or begging, etc., etc. And then this chance of being re-trafficked is not so much there, and then the asylum procedure is not relevant. We don't have the profile. They will always go in the special procedure for THP victims, and actually they get a residence permit throughout the whole procedure as long as the prosecutor considers them as a victim. And there are some conditions which have to be followed.
But that also needs, I suppose that it is the same thing with illegal criminal proceedings in Belgium, that in order to have criminal proceedings in Belgium, then the perpetrators needs to be there, or it needs to be the crime needs to be committed in Belgium.
There has to be a link.
Exactly.
For example, when a Nigerian prostitute goes to Italy, she's been exploited there, she fleds to Belgium, and in Belgium actually there is no link, we have no link, then we cannot help her via this procedure. But then we can actually go further and help her through other procedures. Actually, for THP,
Yes, but then she can apply for refugee status.
a lot of, because in Nigeria you have, for example, NAPTIP, and a lot of migration offices and jurisprudence, asylum jurisprudence, they use this NAPTIP as an excuse to say you can go back because you're protected there. The government is giving you.
Can you explain for the others that don't know that NAPTIP?
NAPTIP is the National Agency for Protection of. In fact, this is a governmental agency, and they offer. You can find it it's in Nigeria, and they offer legal support. They offer social support. They offer psychological support, shelter. But on the other side, they also go and catch the criminals. So, but it's Nigeria. You have to always.
Exactly. That's important to bear in mind, as we touched on yesterday. Yes.
Jurisprudence, I think in UK especially, where they argue, well, there's been a whole, the idea of being re-trafficked has to be, has to be considered. Are you especially vulnerable? Or do you have a risk of being re-trafficked? How about your family? Who can take care of you? And things like that. So
Yes.
to investigate it further.
And that is exactly the same grounds as the Swedish court. And I mentioned one other case yesterday. In that case, the Nigerian woman was trafficked throughout Europe for 10 years. And she tried to escape 3 times. And the traffickers found her every time. And then she got pregnant and she fled to Sweden. And then she gave birth to twins. And she was also placed at the shelter in southern part of Sweden. And then that was a unique judgment. We fought for humanitarian reasons, an exception from the Dublin Agreement. And we fought for that in the migration court, and we won that case because the court said that even if all these reasons separately wouldn't be enough, then all these reasons together would actually make humanitarian reasons, and that is the only exception from the Dublin Agreement. So that was very good. Yes?
I would like to add maybe some info about the situation of minors. It's my experience that also a lot of minors, they come to Belgium with false papers because of course they know that if it's stated that they're actually 14, that they become a UEM, so they give them a false passport when they're 18 or 20 years old. So for example, I was a legal guardian in 2013 of a Somalian girl who was 14 years old when she married a Somalian guy who has the Belgian nationality in Belgium. He was 50, so and then she was Yeah, it was actually trafficking, I think, trafficked to Belgium to be married to the guy. He closed her in a room, beat her, abused her, forced her to do the household and everything. And for example, she fled to Sweden after 1 month because she said, okay, this is not the marriage I expected. But she had on paper, for example, a passport stating that she was 20, and actually at that time she was 15. She applied for asylum in Belgium, in Sweden, but was sent back after I think 2 or 3 months because she was considered as an adult in a Dublin case, and then it's just a marriage problem. You understand? It's not a child being trafficked. But also in Belgium, we also have the same problem because you only have a few possibilities if you have a minor without any papers to prove that he or she is a minor. They do like a scan of your teeth, your collarbone, and your wrists. But for example, the medical tests in Belgium, they're not that accurate, especially African girls often are considered much older. So I think this is also a big challenge at the moment that we have a lot of minors who are considered as adults in the procedures, for example. And yeah, you can see that they're younger, but it's not, you don't have any objective proof that they are new age.
But for the THV procedure, doesn't make any
No,
difference.
I know, for the THV
Doesn't make
doesn't
any
matter.
difference between a minor or an adult.
Yeah.
Even minors are more protected
Mm.
compared to specialist shelters, and they don't need to make those declarations immediately. They have they can immediately get some kind of a residence permit instead of during the reflection periods, whilst adults have not that advantage. So
Yeah, but for example, they don't receive a legal guardian, or when you do the asylum procedure, there's a difference between being a minor or an adult. For example, if the child is considered as an underage girl,
Yeah.
she receives a legal guardian, but when she's considered as an adult,
she won't receive.
Yeah, so there are some differences.
I just wanted to add, when it comes to giving this residence permit that we give to victims of human trafficking, so while the legal procedures continue, we are giving them a residence permit. First, it's for 3 months, then it's after a certain time, it's for 6 months. 3 months. Then it's for 6 months. They can work, they get all the social help they want, and then it's prolongated. And I think 80% of all the victims who enter in this procedure will end up with what we call a B card, and a B card is
Yes. So they will. Do you call that your reflection period? Do you call it the reflection period when they are granted these temporary residence permit, or?
So actually, temporary residence permit starts after they make the declarations, but before that.
And that could be either in a criminal case or in an asylum procedure. No, not an asylum. No, but if they are, if they are victims of human trafficking, the crime is committed abroad, but they are applying for asylum in Belgium.
Then the asylum procedure will continue. They will not enter this special procedure for victims of human trafficking.
Can they do that? Can they be officially recognized as victims of human trafficking?
No, they will not, because they can't enter the procedure because the facts haven't happened. There's no link with Belgium. They can use the fact that they've been trafficked in.
Exactly.
But that's completely different. There's nothing to do. There won't be any criminal procedure.
But still, as I said, that was the same problem we pointed out for Austria, and that was the same problem we pointed out for Sweden, exactly the same you point out for Belgium. And I think this is important because in the beginning of January, the European Court of Human Rights said clearly that the criminal proceedings and the identification of victims of human trafficking, even if they're not part of the criminal proceedings, this needs to be done. And this needs to be done even in the other cases where there's no link to the traffickers, where the crime is committed abroad. So I think it's very important that we highlight that. But I think we have to move on because we really need to hear from Lena Marner.